Hello again, everyone. Welcome. It's another morning, another day, another time to wrap up some BSFO results. First things first, huge. I want to say big and huge at the same time, and huge came out, but that doesn't sound good. Huge thank you to everyone that tuned in to the live streams. Huge thank you to everyone that helped make the event, actually be possible. All the staff, Bushroad, ENTCG, just Elephant, everyone that really contributed to it in any way. The players that came through and played, the viewers that watched the streams, and just the people that made noise on social media about the event as well with hashtag BSFO. Huge thank you to everyone that came through. Honestly, this event could not have happened without all the people behind it, so huge thank you. And of course, the biggest love and thank you to my co-commentator Kai for sitting with me for all those crazy hours last weekend, actually doing the commentary. He's been posting his own videos about the event. I'm gonna kind of make my own in the upcoming weeks. I still have Buddy Fight to commentate this week, so it's after that one that I'll actually sit down and talk about all the commentary experiences. But today I wanted to focus strictly on standard, on the actual overdress event that happened on Saturday, and then basically day 2 happened on the Sunday. And so the top 8 was really interesting, but there were also some pretty cool decks that made it into the top 16. So first we'll talk about the top 8 of each region, and then talk about some notable decks, or some decks that were pretty surprising that I know came up in the top 16, although I know that with some of them there's trouble getting lists of because they weren't shared on social media, but we just know the decks that actually are represented. So first things first, for AO, Asia Oceania, we had a pretty interesting top 8. So here you go. Here's a pie chart made by Fuzzy Paradox. We'll give him some love on Twitter. I'll put a link in the description, so make sure you come through. So 4 Bastions, 2 Orfists, 1 Zorga, and 1 Barrow Magnus. So this one is interesting because in a certain number of ways, right? In AO, for some reason, there was no Bruces. Even though the other 2 events, spoiler alert, were won by Bruce, in the top 8 for AO, there was just no Bruces. I don't know if Bruce was just not popular enough. I know that in Japan, Bruce isn't a very popular deck, even though it's really good. So that's kind of interesting. But Bastion was really well represented in this event, right? It had by far the highest amount of participation rates, and also had the best conversion to top 8. This is just a really good conversion. We'll look at some win rates on the EU side as well later. But I think the big reasons why so many Bastions were at the tops, basically taking up at least half of the top 8s every time, was that, one thing is that the deck is very easy to pick up, and generally you don't need to do anything super complex to actually top with it, right? Compared to Bruce, where you have to manage your hands, soul, field, and deck size all at the same time. In this one, in Bastion, it's very much just it's Bastion, right? You just kind of put down your cards, draw extra cards with Alden, turn on boost with Darkstrain, get your countercharge with Fasado, get the right attack pattern, but it's generally pretty easy. It's generally a pretty straightforward deck, and therefore it doesn't really take that much to pilot it well and make it to the tops. So I think that's a big reason why this deck came up, and also just had the highest participation rate. So many people brought this deck. It's actually crazy, and so I think that was a big part of it. Now, my biggest surprise though was that in all of these top 8s, I mean almost all, except for NA actually, we had Orfist. Orfist to me was a big surprise, and one of these Orfists in the AO region was undefeated. So this one was really surprising to me, because I did feel like Orfist was a pretty good deck, but so many people were discrediting it and saying oh no, it's just token bash, there's nothing amazing about it. Sorry, the birds outside my window are literally having a party, so I had to close it. But there was just this really popular, I don't know, Orfist wasn't even that popular. I think Brankgate was by far the least represented nation, and most of the people that brought Brankgate brought Orfist. There was a Prison top 16, I believe, in NA, so that's pretty cool. A top 16 player actually made it up there with Prison as a deck, so maybe people just didn't respect it enough, or didn't know what to do against it and things like that. But Orfist really showed itself during the weekend of just being this deck that can have a strong early game, so it can push Bastion really well. It seemed like it had a good matchup, and then you basically just even if they pop your stuff, or put your stuff to the bottom of the deck, or clear out your tokens, you don't really care, because you just remake more tokens, use your hand to guard, and basically just survive whatever your opponent throws at you. So Orfist showing up here was actually a pretty big surprise to me. I thought Nirvana would be in that slot instead, but we saw Nirvana's on stream just kind of get counterplayed left and right, and just in general kind of struggle to make it up there. But Orfist really showed up. Orfist really showed up, and it goes to show that it's a pretty strong deck, and that was really nice to see. Zorga, this was the only Zorga that made it into top 8 period this entire event. Zorga felt in the right hands it had quite a lot of potential, but at the same time we saw some games on stream, there was a game with Marton Miko, a pretty famous European player, who literally just had a 6-card hand and it was all orders, right? You just have situations like that where Zorga just kind of fumbles itself, know, it just kind of trips over itself and dies. But apart from that, the deck is strong. It has a really crazy like early power ceiling, you know, it just reaches high power from very early on, from like turn 3 onwards, and it can just like push really well, and it has like, it can drag out games, it has a good resource engine and everything, but it's just those like occasional brick hands where you just draw all your orders that really don't feel too good. Barrow Magnus, on the other hand, I think was a deck that a lot of people expected to do super well. I think a lot of people are going into this saying Barrow Magnus was like one of the best decks for the meta, but it just didn't really show up outside of the one AO top, and this one was very much just like, I don't know, we saw people on stream get that 15 soul early, you know, be super aggressive, but the other decks just seemed to not care. They were just like, okay, well, you can get to your 15 soul, but all of the cards that Barrow Magnus uses early are to soul charge, right? Their entire hand in the early game is used to soul charge, so they don't have much to guard with, and so therefore you can just like push them early really quickly and win the game before they even like get to properly clap back. So I think that was a big part of what's like why Barrow Magnus might be lacking for the time being, but yeah, like, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing that it made to top 8 in the AO region, so I think it was quite cool. Looking at EU though, we see a similar pattern, right? 5 Bastions here this time, so quite a lot of Bastions came through, you know, it was just really well represented. And then we had 2 Bruces, I believe both of which made it to top 4. And so one of the Bruces, of course, won the entire event. This was Kalen Fallon. So Bruce, of course, for a lot of people was seen as like the second best deck. You know, this deck, it's quite a pain to pilot. So of course, playing it for 8 rounds of Swiss, plus top 8, top 4, and finals can be pretty exhausting, purely because it is one of those kind of event, like decks where if you're taking it to a long event, you're gonna eventually potentially make mistakes if you're not super careful about it, because it's like, when do you use your effects to draw, how much do you soul charge, when do you use Gungun Ram, like all those kind of things to make sure you don't deck out, but also you have enough to survive against other decks going second, but also to make sure you win quick enough before you deck out. Like, there's so many questions that you need to consider when playing Bruce, so that like I think for the Bruce players, they had to really prepare for this event. And I love Bruce as a deck myself, so I know how much like pain goes into this sometimes. So honestly, like the people that came through with Bruce, and like Kalen Fallon went undefeated 11-0 the entire event, undefeated in Swiss, won in top 8, top 4, and then finals. Like, we saw it on stream, it was crazy, really amazing showing. And then of course Orfist once again showed up in EU, but sadly didn't make it past top 8, I believe, which was a little bit unfortunate. So I think one of the Orfists in the AO region, so in the AO region both Orfists played against each other in top 8, so one of them had to make it to top 4, but then the top 4 was like triple Bastion, 1 Orfist, whereas in EU I believe it was 2 Bruces and 2 Bastions. So the Orfist, again, you know, we talked about it in strong points so far, it's a really good deck that just like doesn't really care about what your opponent does to your board, because it just kind of remakes it, and it has a really good like early game and has a really good resource engine. Darkness that nobody knows was also pretty key, I think, for a lot of people, that like you could pop Aldens, you know, you could pop, when Verina came up, pop the Verina. Like, a lot of decks have annoying cards that they leave up on the board, like Marjorie's or like Edens for the Bruce matchup, so being able to just pop them and still focus on attacking the face is, I think, a pretty good strong part of this deck. So it's honestly pretty cool. It's honestly pretty cool. And the final top 8 was the NA one. Again, similar pattern here, 5 Bastions, 2 Bruces, and 1 Magnolia. So the Magnolia, of course, has been hyped up a lot as like the Bastion counter because it's super fast and everything, but it also is kind of spaghetti sometimes, where, you know, depending on what kind of engine you play, whether it's Zorga or if it's the Magnolia ride line, or depending on like how well you actually like high roll off of the Magnolia, you know, ride deck and things like that. Like, this deck has crazy potential, and actually, interestingly, there were quite a few of them in top 16, I believe, in AO that barely didn't make it to top 8. So Magnolia had good performances this event. Like, it went X2 a lot, and Magnolia overall like felt like a pretty solid pick going into this event. But I feel like it just kind of slightly didn't make it, you know, slightly lacked that bonus little push that it needed to fully get like the full run into finals. But again, Bruce here went undefeated all the way into finals and won finals. So another, you know, Mad Lad 11-0 Bruce. Pretty amazing to see. So now I have some interesting charts that ENTCG shared with me. So huge shout outs to ENTCG, the organizers of the EU event. Make sure you give them some love. They have a shop actually where you can buy basically, you know, overdress cards from, and also, you know, just get all your stuff. They also run events on their Discord with their cool tournament bots. If you want to participate in some of their locals, I think you can do it with Remote Fight too. So make sure to give them a lot of love because they really busted their asses to run this event, and it was flawlessly run as well. So huge props to them. But we got some cool charts. First things first, they gave us a little Swiss versus top 8 representation chart here. So this is the decks taken into the tournament versus their conversion to top 8. So you can see here, like, look at Brancate, right? Barely, not even 20 decks of Brancate were played in the tournament, and only, you know, the 2 of them made it into top cut. So this was pretty insane to see. Oh no, sorry, it was only one. There's only one Orfist that made it in from basically the 19. So pretty impressive when you look at it that way, right? Dragon Empire, over 20 players, not a single one converted. Stoicheia, almost 40 players brought it, not a single one converted into top 8. But I think quite a few of them were X2 and like almost made it. So pretty close, pretty close. Dark States, of course, the 2 Bruces. You know, these are by nation, right? So these do go like between the 2 builds, but between the 2 ride lines in the nation. So you can't really tell which one's Bruce, which one's like Baramagnus in this case. But here, you know, we see the 2 Bruces that converted from like the what 50-ish, almost 50 players that brought Dark States to the tournament. And finally, Keter Sanctuary, by far the most popular one, taking up, you know, over 60 players, you know, but 5 of them converted, so it's pretty strong conversion there. So again, you can kind of judge how things look on that side. Then we got a wins and losses chart for me in TCG, where you can see again by nation, not by ride deck unfortunately. So I know that there were some Hexa Orbs as well that made it to, almost made it to top 8, you know, went X2 as well in the event. I think we saw one of them on stream even. So yeah, Hexa Orb actually had some interesting performances. So here you can see like the win rates of Keter Sanctuary are pretty good, you know, nearly 200 wins compared to like 170-ish losses. It's pretty even, but still like a better win rate than, you know, than the losing rate. Dark States as well had like a more positive win rate. Stoicheia and Dragon Empire just kind of flopped though. Unfortunately, had a way bigger losing rate than their win rate. So pretty unfortunate to see that. But then Brandgate pretty closely tied. You know, it's hard to say which build won more, which build lost more, but it's a really cool little graphic to see. In terms of nation representation for the whole event, you can see here. So this is 32% Keter Sanctuary, 25% Dark States, by far the second most popular, barely 10% Brandgate, 13% Dragon Empire, and just about 20% Stoicheia. So it's honestly pretty equal when you look at it like that. You know, Keter is more than the others, but like Stoicheia and Dark States aren't too different in terms of their representation. Then Brandgate is kind of low actually when you look at it compared to Keter, but you know, still popped up in there. And they even recorded matchups between the different nations. So this one is really the part where it's really unfortunate we can't see this by ride lines, because you can see here, like basically looking at it from the left side, right? So Dragon Empire, for example, against Dark States won 16 times when that matchup came up, and then Dark States won 20 times when that matchup came up. So the greens are the good matchups for the ones on the left. So for Dark States, like Dragon Empire and Brandgate were good matchups, whereas the others were even. Whereas for Brandgate, like Dragon Empire was a good matchup, and then Dark States and Keter weren't, although it's kind of surprising. And then, you know, the mirror was even, and then Stoicheia was just utter domination. But you can see like the best numbers, of course, are for the ones that were most represented, like Keter basically just having, look at these things, 3 amazing matchups and then 2 where it just kind of fell short. But of course, there's also counts Hexa Orbs, so keep that in mind. And then there's just Stoicheia kind of on the lower end. I guess Dragon Emperor and Stoicheia both just kind of feeling a little bit short in terms of their win rates here. So really cool chart. So huge thank you to Ian from me and TCG for making these charts. You know, another statistics head, much like myself. You know, we love our charts and numbers and like analysis and things like that. So it's really cool to see. So huge thank you again for them to, you know, let me feature these charts on the video as well. Now, in terms of some of the interesting decks that we saw that kind of didn't quite make it, there was a Hexa Orb that actually came top 16, so didn't make it to top 8, but there's a list on Twitter. I'll try to put it up here if I manage to find it in time, but you know, you can check the hashtag BSFO on Twitter where people share their deck lists. You know, a lot of the top players actually share their deck list. You know, you can get inspiration from how these decks are played, and they talked about their matchups and their rounds and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to see that they came through and like talked about it on Twitter, you know, kind of try to build up a following. So especially give follows to the people that came to top 8, you know, or just the people that you thought were a cool player you saw on stream, or you saw a cool deck, give them some follows, you know, give them some love. So it was really cool to see Hexa Orb come through. You know, I definitely feel like this deck does have potential, and seeing other people explore that potential is really nice. You know, seeing it come out on top, I think in set 2 this deck will get pretty good. I think people are kind of sleeping on it right now, but it was really nice to see it actually come top 16. There was a police deck that came top 16, I think in the NA region. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a deck list, so if you do have one, please like link it to me. You know, if it's on Twitter or something, just drop a link. I'll put it in as a pinned comment or something. You know, any cool deck lists like that. I think there was an X2, was there an X2 Eugene? I can't remember. There was a Eugene that was doing quite good. I think Aero Tanks was running it at some point, you know, just the Eugene Mad Lads running around. I think some Eugenes were doing pretty okay. There was a Verena that went X2, I think also in, I think it was in the EU region or in the AO region, I can't remember, but I do have a picture of that one. So Verena did do pretty decently, almost made it to top 8, you know, pretty close, pretty close. But yeah, apart from that, both Stoicheia decks got some representation in top 8, both both Dark States deck got representation, and then apart from that, like, Orfist did really well. I think that was the big surprise. So a lot of the other top 16 that I saw were like quite a few Magnolia decks. Quite a few Magnolias like barely made it into top 8, so they had really good showings, but just kind of like bubbled out. So it's like a lot of people are saying it does have a good matchup against Bastion because it's so fast, but it just kind of like sometimes it boils down to how good your opening is, which is like, you know, not the best thing to be taking into a tournament. Some people don't like that instability, so they instead choose to take something else instead. And I got one more little chart for you guys from ENTCG, which is kind of like the win-loss and total games list per nation. So here you can see the total games played and win rates for all nations. So here, Keter Sanctuary as a nation had a 53% win rate with 373 games played, and then basically 52% for Dark States, and then after that it goes down. Brandgate had a almost even win rate, but then Stoichia and Dragon Empire definitely didn't look as hot. But of course, Brandgate, with the least amount of players, had by far the least amount of games. Basically, not even, it's lesser than a third of the total games that Keter Sanctuary played throughout the tournament, which is pretty insane when you think about it. So yeah, this is really cool. Like, lots of interesting statistics, lots of interesting data about the event. Hopefully, once the VODs have been, you know, checked and everything, we can rewatch the tournament experiences, or at least some of the top games. You know, I think it's really cool to learn from the plays and like the interviews and like from the players themselves, you know, how they made it to the top. I'll be doing a video on the V Premium event as well, so I think you guys can look forward to that. It's a lot of cool stuff there as well to discuss, and like the meta and how it shaped up, because a lot of nice things actually happened there. But yeah, that's basically it for this discussion of the overdress tournament for BSFO. It was overall a huge success, you know, so many players, over 200 players for every event, so it's super hype, and I really hope we can have another one like this in, you know, some other time this year, maybe in the fall season or something like that. Would be super cool, so I really look forward to it. Also, if you need to pick up any overdress cards, do head over to parkage.com and use discount code DifferentFight for 5% discount at checkout. It does help the channel, so I do appreciate it big time. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.